Today, we are looking at one of Britain's most baffling and high-profile unsolved murders. It's a really twisty story about a horrific crime, a super controversial conviction, and a legal outcome that, honestly, is hard to wrap your head around. It leaves a man acquitted, but never actually found innocent.
So yeah, let's just start right there, with the central paradox of this whole thing. How is it even possible for someone to be acquitted of murder, to be set free, when no jury ever actually said the words not guilty? This very question is really at the heart of the Jenkins story, and figuring it out is the key to understanding this whole fascinating and, let's be real, frustrating case.
So it all starts with an awful tragedy. Back in 1997, a 13-year-old girl named Bilie Jenkins was brutally murdered. She was just at her foster home in Hastings, England, painting the patio doors. People who knew her said she was fun-loving and wanted to be an actor. And then this happened.
And that terrible day kicked off a legal saga that has dragged on for decades. Her foster father, Jenkins, was convicted a year later. But believe me, that was just the beginning. That conviction led to years in prison, then not one, but two retrials, and eventually a formal acquittal. The case is still officially unsolved, though. A recent forensic review might just change everything.
Okay, so let's rewind and go back to the beginning. How did the prosecution build its case? Well, right after the murder, the police investigation very quickly honed in on one main suspect, Bilie Jo's foster father, Jenkins.
And the single most powerful piece of physical evidence they had against him? It all came down to this number, 158. That's how many microscopic spots of Bilie Jo's blood the police found on his jacket, his trousers, and his shoes. The prosecution's argument was simple. This was impact spatter. Basically, a superfine mist of blood that could only have been created by the sheer violence of the attack. But it wasn't just the science. Jenkins's own behavior raised some huge red flags for the investigators. Police came to believe he killed Bilie Jo, then took his other daughters to a hardware store, taking this weirdly long route to try and create an alibi. He waited to call 999, and he kept changing his story. Add to that a known history of a really violent temper, and you can see why police were painting a very suspicious picture.
This quote from Detective Superintendent Jeremy Payne really sums up the entire police theory of the crime. For the prosecution, it was a clear case of domestic rage that just exploded into horrific violence. And in 1998, a jury agreed with them, finding him guilty with a unanimous decision.
But, as you probably guessed, the story was nowhere near over. While Jenkins was serving his life sentence, his legal team went to work on an appeal. And they didn't just question his behavior, they went right after the scientific heart of the prosecution's case, those 158 spots of blood.
So this is what the whole appeal boiled down to. On one side, you have the prosecution's theory, impact spatter, blood flying off the weapon during the attack. But the defense came back with something totally new, expirated blood. Their experts argued that as Jenkins leaned over Bilie Jo's dying body, a very rare phenomenon could have caused her to breathe out a fine mist of blood from her airway, which then landed on his clothes.
Now, here's the crucial point. This new scientific possibility, no matter how rare, was just enough to make the original conviction feel unsafe. The Court of Appeal basically said that if the first jury had heard this other explanation, they might have reached a different verdict. So Jenkins was granted a retrial and let out on bail. And this is where the story gets even stranger. The successful appeal didn't end with a not guilty verdict. Not at all. Instead, it led to this weird legal limbo and a huge controversy over some critical evidence that the new juries were never even allowed to hear.
Yeah, the road to his acquittal was messy. Jenkins went on trial again in 2005, but that jury couldn't agree on a verdict. So they tried him a third time in 2006, and the same thing happened. Another hung jury. At that point, with two juries completely deadlocked, the prosecution decided it just couldn't go for a fourth trial. And because of that, Jenkins was formally acquitted. He walked free, but not because any jury said he was innocent.
And this takes us right back to our first question, but now with a whole new layer of mystery. Because it turns out there was some absolutely explosive evidence that both of those retrial juries were legally forbidden from ever hearing about. So what was this secret evidence? Well, first, there was powerful testimony from Jenkins's ex-wife, who described him as a violent man. But the real bombshell was a brand new forensic analysis of those 158 blood spots. Scientists discovered they didn't just have blood in them. They also had microscopic fragments of Bilie Jo's bone, tiny particles of her flesh, and even minute fragments of metal from the tent peg used to kill her. This evidence seems to completely demolish that expirated blood theory, right? But in a hugely controversial decision, the judge ruled all of it inadmissible, saying it was brought in too late for the defense to properly respond to.
And so that's where we are today, a case completely stuck in limbo. A formal acquittal, but zero real answers, and absolutely no closure for anyone, especially not for Billie Joe's family.
Looking at the aftermath, it's just a mess of unanswered questions. The murder is officially unsolved. Jenkins is a free man, but he was denied compensation for the years he spent in prison because, and this is a direct quote from the Ministry of Justice, there's no evidence that can conclusively prove his innocence. The only glimmer of anything new is that 2022 announcement of a fresh forensic review.
Which leaves us with this final, nagging question. After all the trials, all the theories, all the controversy, after more than 25 years, could modern science, the very thing that got this case so tangled up in the first place, finally give us a real answer in the tragic murder of Billie Joe Jenkins? For now, all we can do is wait and see.